Welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. Here at Sunshine Parenting, I share ideas, stories, and tips to help parents and anyone else who works with young people raise competent, kind, and optimistic kids. Here at Sunshine Parenting, summer camp, parenting, and happiness are my main gigs. So if you're interested in any or all of those topics, you've come to the right place. In this episode, episode 22, I'm talking with my friend and fellow camp director, Maria Horner. This is such a fun episode, and I think you'll enjoy hearing about Maria's Jedi Mom Tricks. Enjoy the podcast. So I'm really excited to have Maria Horner on the podcast today. Maria is the owner and director of Catalina Island Camps, and she has been in the camp industry for years, even before her work at Catalina Island Camps. And what I've always been impressed about Maria is especially her skill at working with teenagers. In addition to her work at camp, she has been volunteering at her church, leading the high school youth group for many years, and she just has a great rapport with teenagers. So I contacted Maria about being on the podcast and was thinking I'd want to talk with her about just ideas and tips for parents with our teenagers. But as it turns out, she had an even better idea. And so this episode is going to be Maria Horner's Jedi Mom Tricks. And I'm just going to introduce Maria. Maria, tell us a little bit about your background and yourself and how you came up with the name Jedi Mom Tricks for this training that you do with your counselors at Catalina Island Camps.
Thanks, Audrey. This is really fun. This is exciting. So actually, I can't take credit for the Jedi Mom Tricks title. That was my son. So the whole concept, I started working at a Girl Scout camp when I was in college, and I always tell my staff this story that I actually started working at camp because I didn't like having to make my bed in the morning, which means that after being in college for a year, I moved back home for the summer and felt oppressed by the fact that my mother made me make my bed every morning. So I knew I had to find a job where I didn't have to live at home. And so I had friends in school who worked at this Girl Scout camp, and through, I think, a really lucky turn of events, I got the job and fell in love with it. So I worked for the Girl Scouts for 9 years before I got married, and my husband and I, Tom and I, moved to Catalina Island Camps. So I had been a camp director for about 11 years before I became a mom. And my son, Nick, was born in 1996, so he just turned 21 this last summer. And I discovered through this whole process of being a mother that while I had learned a lot of things about being a good parent from being a camp counselor, I was learning a lot of things as a mom that I thought would be equally helpful for young college students working as staff members. So every summer, I would share some of those things with my staff, and my poor son, all of his life secrets have been told to years of Catalina Island Camp staff members. He's got no privacy, the poor kid. And about 3 or 4 years ago, he was still in high school, and one afternoon we were sitting at the kitchen table, as is kind of our way. He was doing his homework, and I was working on staff training. And he said, "Hey, Mom, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on the session that I do at staff training every year where I teach counselors how to be good counselors, and I use a lot of stuff that I've learned as being a mom." And he looked up at me, and you remember, he's like 17 years old. He looks up at me, and he's like, Mom, you need to teach them all of those things you do to control my mind. And I looked back at him. And I'm pretty lucky. I have a pretty great kid. I looked back at him, and I said, what do you mean? He's like, those Jedi mom tricks that you do that control my mind without ever yelling or getting mad. And so from that point, the entire session was renamed. Last year, I made a really cute handout for it, and when I sent him the picture of it away at college, he told me he wanted to trademark the name Jedi Mom Tricks and get a royalty for it because it was his idea. And I told him that paying college tuition was the only royalty that he was going to get. But anyway, so the name, I had to give him credit. Name was really his idea. And it's super fun because he's, of course, on staff now. So for the last 3 summers, as I teach this material, he's sitting in the room, which at first was a little awkward, but now he actually thinks is pretty funny.
Oh, that is so, I love that story. When you told me that, I knew that was for sure going to be our first podcast episode together. It's going to be these Jedi Mom tricks. So I know you have a lot of these tricks, and maybe we'll talk about it after, but maybe if you want to just share that PDF that you provide your staff, we can make it a download for parents who are interested. But today, we were going to focus on 4 of your Jedi Mom tricks. And so why don't you start with one of them that you think is one of the most helpful tricks that you teach your counselors?
Absolutely. And I think the first thing that I teach them, this isn't really a trick, but it's a preface to it. I explain to them that these really aren't tricks. Basically, in order for any of this stuff to work, and I think this is equally true as a parent, you have to have a strong relationship with the kids that you're trying to use these on, right? Like it works with my son because we have a relationship. When I teach this at camp, I always point out 1 or 2 staff in the group who have been with us since they were kids, or kids who were in my youth group at church who now work for me. And I share with them, like, these things even work with these 20, 22, 25-year-old young men and women because of the relationship I have. So we focus a lot on building that relationship, because if you don't have it, none of this stuff works. But hands down, the most powerful one, and the one that I have staff summer after summer coming back and telling me about, is what I like to call the look. And I think every parent certainly has a look, and every good camp counselor develops one over the course of the summer. And that's just the ability, and it's different for everyone, but the ability to look at a child when they're about to do something wrong, or they've already started doing something wrong, that conveys maybe not your displeasure, but your curiosity about why they're making that choice, so that they know, hey, this is maybe not a great idea, and they can stop themselves and change their own behavior without you having to even say a word, let alone yell or say something angrily.
That is so classic. And I'm envisioning right now you're training your counselors practicing their look with each other.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's so funny is they always ask me to do it. And what I explain to them is it's really not a trick. It's not something that I can just conjure up. It has to be in response to something. Mm-hmm. But what's helpful is having staff in the group who have been on the receiving end of that, either as campers, as staff members, who can attest to the fact that, yeah, you actually really can do that. And then staff who have been around for a while, who have had success. I don't know about you, but a lot of our staff, they're young. They're 19 and 20 years old, and they want to be friendly with their campers. They don't want to yell at them. They don't want to even have to speak in an angry or disapproving tone to them. And so I really tell them, if you build this look, if you develop this look, then you never have to raise your voice, and you can get kids to at least think about what they're about to do or what they're doing without having to get angry. And I think that's super powerful, because nobody wants to scream, right? Like, that's not ever helpful. Who responds well to that? And then the sort of the part B to the look is, and this was a big Michael Brandwein thing. This piece I can't take credit for, is the head tilt. And so this is always fun to demonstrate as well, is to if you shoot the look at somebody and it doesn't seem to work, you're making eye contact with them and they're not getting the message. Again, you don't have to say anything. You just sort of tilt your head, and it's kind of like the exclamation point on the look. And I have to tell you, I've been directing camp now this will be my 34th summer. And I've been working with the kids at my church for 16 years. And I'm not going to say there aren't any kids in my history that have not responded to this, but there are very few. Like, once you build a relationship with them and they care about what you think, then having that look is all you need to do the vast majority of the time to get kids to think about their choices. And what's really fun for me now is watching my counselors develop that in themselves. Because I think it's such a simple thing, but it's such a powerful tool.
Oh my gosh. And I think that kind of reminds me, if anyone, we also do this video training. You might do it too, the expert online training. And there's this one where Chris Thurber goes through these things, and it's the look, it's trying to use the least amount of energy possible when you're, giving some feedback to kids. And so that really reminds reminds me of that. When you're a parent, it takes a lot of energy, managing your kids day in, day out. And so if you can do anything that reduces the amount of effort you need to put into giving feedback, that is so great. So first of all, two things. One is you're going to have to do a photo shoot and get a picture of the combination because it's going to have to go with this podcast. Your look with the head tilt. We want the full thing. So you're going to have to do a photo shoot and just have somebody do something so that you get the authentic look, whatever you need to do. But I really need that to go along with this, because I think actually you're right that kids actually know their parents' own look. I know my kids are very perceptive of, I don't have to say anything and they're like, what did I do? Or whatever. So, so it is, but that is such a powerful tool, and probably especially for either counselors or parents who didn't have that modeled to them, that maybe they had a yeller, as a parent.
Right.
It might be a new idea. So that is incredibly powerful and really such a great tip that is so excellent for counselors and parents. Okay, so what's your next one?
So, I am a big fan, as I'm sure most people who work with kids are, of giving kids ownership of their choices and their options. And so giving kids choices of what they want to do. However, one of the things that I learned when Nick was young was about what those choices look like. So this is an example I always give during staff training, and I'd love to put it out on the internet airways so even more people can hear this and he can be embarrassed globally instead of just locally. When he was really little, like when he was three-ish, four-ish, he hated taking a bath. He absolutely hated taking a bath. And it's so much so that Tom and I took turns with that responsibility, because it was painful. And, he was a typical little boy. He was super dirty every day. Like, he needed to take a bath every day. So we'd always say, hey, Nick, do you want to take a bath? And what would he say?
No.
Yeah, no. And after, we're slow learners. After a while of watching this and experiencing it, I decided to try something different. So when it was my turn, when it was bath time, I would say, hey, Nick, it's time to take a bath. Do you want to walk to the bathroom, or do you want me to carry you? Do you want a piggyback ride? Like, I would give him choices about how we would get to the bathroom, but not an option about whether or not to take a bath. And the first few times we tried that, he would, of course, respond by saying, I don't want to take a bath. And we would just say very calmly, it's time to take a bath. Do you want me to carry you, or do you want to walk to the bathroom? And, you say that 2 or 3 times, and they finally realize, oh, I'm not going to win this battle, and, you take a bath. And so that's something I teach my counselors all the time, that giving kids choices is awesome. You have to make sure that the options are all acceptable to you. You can't say to a group of kids, hey, guys, you want to clean up the cabin right now? Because what happens when they say no, right? Then all of a sudden you're engaged in a battle with a group of 8-year-old boys, and that's never going to end well, right? Mm-hmm. You're never going to win that. So really thinking about how you offer options to kids. And, I'm sure like at Gold Arrow, we talk a lot about asking kids open-ended questions and getting kids to think and problem solve for themselves. But too often we ask questions that have sort of either-or answers, and one of the answers is unacceptable. And so you're just setting yourself up for an argument, and who wants that?
Right.
So we then go through and brainstorm a lot of the kinds of questions we ask kids. You want to get ready now? Do you want to go take your swim test? Do you want to sponge the table after lunch? Anytime where you ask a question that could be yes or no, when one of those answers is not okay, you've got to reframe the question.
Do you want to use the rag or the sponge to clean the table?
Right.
Yeah. No, that is, that is really brilliant. And I think the key point too is to talk ahead of time and to think about what are those points there that you end up in a conflict or the kid is saying no to, and really thinking through what are some options that you can offer so that there's not an ability to say no. So I was thinking you were going to go with, do you want to take a bath or a shower tonight? I thought that was where it was going. But because that's another one of those things that instead of if it's not an option and they do need to do something, or, just, I don't know, what time you're going to take it. Do you want to take your bath before dinner or before reading time tonight? Or something. I don't know, just but so that they feel that sense of control. But what a great tip. That is so, so awesome. Okay, so we've done 2. What's number 3?
So the third one, again, my poor child, when he was in preschool, one of his best friends, they were 3 years old, and his best friend, his name was Scotty. Scotty had an older brother and sister, significantly older. So like his brother was in 4th grade and his sister was in 6th grade. So the rules in that house looked a little different than the rules in our house, with 2 camp director parents and an only child, right? You can just imagine, there's a different environment. And Nick would often come home, and I'm not a crazy parent. My kid was allowed to be in other people's houses and, hear different kinds of music or, different sorts of words being used. My kid thought idiot was a bad word until he was about 10. Mm-hmm. So, we were okay with that, but he would come home and I would have to explain to him that that's okay that happened there, but the rules in our house are different. So here are the rules in the Horner house. So we talked a lot about the rules in the Horner house and what those rules were and so what the expectations were. And one day he said to me, Mom, I don't think I want to live in the Horner house anymore. There are too many rules. I'm thinking I want to go live at this friend's house instead. I'm like, awesome, let's give his mom a call. So the way that I frame that for my staff is that we have rules at camp. We have really specific rules about how we talk to one another, how we interact with people, the ways that we participate. And those might look very different from how kids engage in their world at home, especially when you're talking about like adolescents and teenagers, how they talk to their friends at home. Mm-hmm. You've got boys, boys mm-hmm. with their other boy friends, sometimes the language and the way they talk to each other mm-hmm. doesn't sound very kind. Mm-hmm. And so what we talk to our staff about is telling your kids, like, if that's how you talk in your family, if that's how you talk with your friends at home, in school, or on your football team, whatever, that's totally cool. Here at camp, this is how we do it. And this is really important to me because I don't want my staff judging how other families work or how other organizations that serve youth work just because they're different from what we do. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some real power, especially for teenagers, in acknowledging, you and your buddies on the basketball team, call each other those names all the time. Totally, that's fine. Here at camp, we don't use those words to define our relationships with our cabin mates. Mm-hmm. We have, we tend to, the bulk of our kids, while our kids start as young as 6 and 7, the vast majority of our kids are 13, 14, and 15 years old. And so there's a strong desire at that age to test out new words, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. To try new language and to maybe be a little different than you are at home. And, maybe you can try out being a little edgier or whatever. And so we talk to our staff a lot about jumping on that right away and just reminding people, this is how we do it at camp. You might do it differently at home, and that's okay, but here's how we do it at camp.
Oh, that's another awesome tip and sounds very familiar to what we do at camp. It's mm-hmm. just the same thing. It's just like, welcome to this kind of new place, this new family. Here's how we do things here. It may be different from what you do at home. So I love the way you describe that. There's nothing wrong with what's going on other places, but here, this is how we're going to get along together. This is how we're going to talk to each other. That's so great. And it's so funny because I use the same thing at my house with, I even had the opportunity yesterday morning because one of my kids didn't want to have breakfast before we left for church, and I said, in our family we have breakfast because then we're nicer to each other because right. the low blood sugar makes you kind of unpleasant to be around. So even though right. Whatever you want to do, if you want to grab a bagel to take in the car, whatever. But it was funny because I had that opportunity just yesterday to say, well, actually in our family we do eat breakfast. So there you go.
Well, it's so funny because like I said, Nick is 21 now. He's home for Christmas. He goes to school in Ohio, and he knows that on Sundays in our house we go to church. Mm-hmm. It's just what we do. And it's so interesting. I have friends in our church community say, "Oh my gosh, how do you get him to go to church with you on Sunday? I'd love when my kids are home to go." And I just say it's just what we do.
Right.
Like it's not. Mm-hmm. There are many things in our house that mm-hmm. in our family that are negotiable mm-hmm. and that we can talk about and that we can even change mm-hmm. Over time as he gets older. But mm-hmm. there are a couple of things that are non-negotiable, and he knows what those are.
Right.
So it's not even a conversation. Are we going to do this or not? It's just we're going to do this. So here we go.
Yep. I love that. And that's so true. And that's also just, I think that's the thing that, so you and I have had the advantage of, because we're camp directors and we've had to really establish these things at camp and think through, well, what are we going to allow in terms of, all these different things, how they talk to each other. And so it probably is translated the same way for you as it has for me, in that for my family, it's the same way. We've thought through these things and we've just made them, this is how we do things here. And so it ends up not being a debatable thing. Even when kids come and say, the rules I like the rules better over there, then I always say, when you're an adult, you'll get to decide what your rules are going to be.
Right.
While you're here, this is how we do things. And it's, it seems it kind of just, they get it because they know that we're sticking with kind of our thing. And of course, we'll talk about things like when things come up, but at the same time, they just know. And so that's a really great point, that something that parents can learn sort of from our whole camp thing is just, if something's important to you or you value it a lot, make it one of those family non-negotiable things.
And as long as you don't have too many of those, you can really stick to the ones that you do have. I think the parent friends that I have or the parents that I talk to either through my youth group or my camp parents, the ones who really struggle, when I ask them, well, what are those things in your family? They've got like a list of 25. And it's like, no wonder. We have very few in our house, but the ones that we have, he knows better than to even ask. Like he knows it's a waste of oxygen.
Right. Right. Oh, so good. Okay, so let's finish up your last. I think we're on number 4. Okay. Tell us your one of your other tricks. We're definitely going to need to have you on again, but share number 4, and then we'll close this one up.
Awesome. So I'm a talker. You probably know that. And so I work really hard when I talk to kids to ask questions instead of deliver, especially with the teenagers that I work with. Instead of sort of delivering an edict or my own opinion, I ask a lot of questions. And one of the things that I found with my son, who he's not a huge talker, especially when he was younger, is I would ask him something, and his immediate response, without even like blinking an eye, was, I don't know. And so initially, I would then tell him what he needed to know, right? Like I would answer the question for him. And I think as adults, we're so afraid of silence that's our response, right? When a kid says, I don't know, or they're just silent because they don't have an answer, we have to fill that silence. So one of the things that I talk to my staff and I teach my staff is to say, that's okay, take a minute and think about it. And then to really sit quietly and to give the kid a chance to think before they respond. I think kids are so used to being able to say, I don't know, because then the adult tells them what they're supposed to say, and they can move on to whatever's next. It just happens more quickly, right? Like they get to the end result and they get to go back out and play or do whatever. This is especially true if you're talking with kids who have just been involved in some sort of behavior that you need to get them to think about and change, or they just want to get back to having fun, right? They don't want to have a conversation about it. And so that was a big thing for Nick growing up, is he just wanted to say, I don't know, then have me give him the information that I wanted him to have so he could go back to doing whatever. And as soon as I learned how to be quiet, which was not an easy lesson for me to learn. It's not natural for me. To just be quiet and say, it's okay. You're a smart kid. Take a minute and you'll come up with something. And then, for me, what I have to do is I actually have to breathe and count my breaths and not allow myself to say anything until I get to like 30 or 35, which is really hard because while that's not a very long period of time, it feels like an eternity. But in my experience, if you give kids that time and space when you've asked them a question and asked them to really think about something, they almost always come up with something.
That's so good. And you know what? As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, I think this might be good in all relationships, not just with our kids, because I'm the same way. And, when you have a husband who's quieter or other, it's friends. Mm-hmm. I think that being okay with silence and not just, you and I, and we can go on forever. We can have these long chats and just, thoughts come to our head and we say them and it just really flows. But a lot of people are not like that. And if we kind of steamroll over them with all our ideas and everything else, we're just not allowing them to have that learning process that they need. So I love that. I think I'm just envisioning you taking your breaths and counting to 35 and just letting the silence, happen. And what a great thing. I think it reminds me of how in management classes, they always talk about the 80-20 rule. And when you're talking to an employee, make sure that they're doing 80% of the talking so that you're asking open-ended questions so that they're thinking and then they have ownership in what they decide. So it's not you saying, I need you to do it this way. It's them coming up with, oh, I think I did it this way last time, but maybe this way would be better. And they're thinking through it and having that whole learning process. So what a great tip. Okay, Maria, these have been terrific tricks, and I'm going to have to have you on again because we're going to all be curious about, I know there's 8 more amazing ones. So we'll have to do a follow-up episode on your next set of tricks. So Maria, tell listeners about Catalina Island Camps and where they can find information about your program so that if they're interested in having their kids go to your beautiful camp, they know where to find you.
Awesome. So Catalina Island Camps is an independent camp for boys and girls on Catalina Island. We're located on the west end of the island at a place called Howland's Landing. And we have campers as young as 6 and 7 all the way up through kids who have completed 9th grade. And then we have a leadership training program for kids who have completed 10th grade and then beyond that, a counselor and training program and all of that. And we are right on the beach, so we do a lot of stuff on the ocean. We sail and kayak and snorkel and swim and paddleboard, but we also do some stuff on the land. We have a high ropes course and a climbing wall, and we do archery and riflery and tomahawk throwing, which is honestly the most fun thing in the world. We just added last summer. We also have an organic garden. We have a real focus on sustainability at our camp. We run an outdoor education program during the school year as well, and so our kids are deeply involved in that program. They help out in the garden. We compost all of our food waste, and the kids are really involved with that. One of the most common questions I get from parents in the fall is for resources on how to start composting in their backyards because their kids come home and are super into it. So we're proud of that. But the best way to get information is just to go to our website, which is Catalina Island Camps with an S on the end.com.
Awesome. Okay, that's terrific. And I will definitely put a link in the show notes so that people can just go directly there. And we'll get all those great pictures of you making faces and whatnot so we can include them in the podcast. But this has been so much fun, Maria. Thank you so much for being on the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. We'll definitely do it again sometime.
Thanks, Audrey. I look forward to it.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. I really enjoyed talking with Maria, and I hope you learned something from her Jedi Mom Tricks. I've provided a recap of the 4 tricks, as well as links to some of the things that Maria and I discussed at my website. You can find those notes at sunshine-parenting.com and search for episode 22. If you follow me on Facebook, my Facebook page is Sunshine Parenting. I started a series at the beginning of January called One Simple Thing. I'm sharing simple tips to try to create a more peaceful, less stressful, happier year for your family. And each month I'm sharing one simple tip. I shared January's tip back on January 1st, and next week I'll be sharing February's tip on February 1st, and I hope you'll join me on Facebook. Most likely I'll convert that to a podcast episode as well for those of you who just listen here at the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. Have a fantastic week. I'm going to leave you with a quote from a book that I was reminded of when Maria was talking about the fundamental importance of relationship. While this quote refers to the tips shared in this parenting book, I think they also refer to Maria's Jedi Mom Tricks. This is a quote from Erica Reisher, PhD, from her book, What Great Parents Do, 75 Simple Strategies for Raising Fantastic Kids. It's tip number 74, which is great parents focus on the relationship. This is what Erica says. Without a strong, loving relationship built on mutual trust and respect, all the principles and practices described here are just techniques for increasing compliance. In the context of a good relationship, however, the ideas discussed in this book become a powerful tool for parents to create a family life that is loving, supportive, and harmonious.